was a founding member, which makes me feel really old along these classes. Now that we have made more specific priorities, the team and I are focused on the disproportionality in higher level courses and gifted education. Our goal, Randy and I, is to increase, and everyone, is to increase the likelihood of non-white students in gifted and higher level classes. This work started several years ago when we took our first steps at addressing this. The administration looked over data last summer that broke down the representation of students by percentage in our gifted, advanced, and AP classes. This started conversations with the principals about steps we could take as the instructional leaders of our schools for better identification. Last fall, the district brought in a training on the characteristics of gifted students, and then Randy and I came together, as Christine was saying, right before February, around that time, and recruited a team, they were up there just on the last slide, of passionate educators and principals representing all the schools to take even further steps. Randy has the fun part of the presentation. He is going to elaborate on the amazing work that the middle school has already started doing, as well as what our team's been doing this year. Randy, take it away.
Thanks, Beth. Great job. So again, thank you for having us and allowing us to have this space to describe the work that we've really embarked on. I was talking to Christina Carter earlier. I'm very passionate about this, and I'm quite loquacious, so I can really go on and on. But I really want to summarize and just give you all the major points to have you understand the level of work that went into trying to accomplish this task. So first thing that comes to mind is actually what I'd like to do is just put it in context really quickly. So I'm sure you can see that slide, but to give you a more contextual background, right now in the middle school we have a little over 1,600 students, and in our seminar program, so our gifted program, we have exactly one black student, right? So one student out of over 1,600 are, in receiving gifted services. So just to give you some context of why this work is important. All right, so now we know and understand, why this is important. It's also, for us, we had to figure out, all right, so how do we operationalize this? It's one thing to recognize, hey, we have this issue. What are we actually going to do to solve this issue? How can we come up with a system or process? So what I want to do is provide you just, again, I can go on and on, but I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we specifically have done at the middle school, and then after that, talk about what the next steps are, how we can really get this process to be emulated in the rest of our buildings. So the first thing that we did at the middle school is we had to go and look at data, of course. And specifically, our data really consisted of looking at all students. And again, I want to emphasize that this is not an exclusionary process. We look at all students, right? So we're not only looking at students of color when it comes to identifying those who could be in higher level courses or who could possibly be tested for gifted services. This is everyone, all right? So after going through our data, we identify student levels, right? So if they're level 1, they're demonstrating an aptitude to do well. We also reviewed grades. We looked at benchmark results. We looked at our unit tests, the PSSAs, as I mentioned. So we looked at that for everyone, and then from there, we pulled out students of color. So not just black students, Hispanic students, everyone, pretty much non-white students. We specifically pulled them out of all that data that we collected. And through that process, we continued to just kind of filter out and identify, all right, who are students who are really demonstrating a strong aptitude. And then from there, we compiled a list of those who demonstrated that they can do well at higher level courses. All their assessment data showed that they were proficient or advanced, and their grades were really high as well. And one thing I forgot to mention is teacher input, all right? So after that, we have the luxury at the middle school where we meet once a week as a pupil services department, and we're talking about all kids. So we already had a process in place, so we kind of supplemented this process. We didn't reinvent the wheel. We said, you know what? We already have a process for how we identify students, but now we're specifically going to look at those who are underrepresented. So during that, throughout the course of a school year, we continued to look at the students that we compiled on the list and just monitor their progress. And then students who, especially after the first quarter, who continue to demonstrate, proficiency on their benchmark assessments, high grades and all that, we then would say, hey, you know what? Here are some students who we're going to recommend to go through our child study team process. And again, I don't want to insult your intelligence, but for those who are not too familiar with the child study team process, that really is just kind of pulling students in, not them, pulling them in, but looking at, all right, who can we possibly recommend for testing, and go through a process, or go through our testing process. So every week we meet, we talk about the students, and those who go through the CST process, the Child Studies Team process, we continue to collect data, and then we give what we call a teacher data summary, which is a document that we send out to our teachers to get their input as well. So when we get their input, we continue to monitor their progress. We then see, okay, by the second quarter, we continue to look at those who are really demonstrating strengths, and we say, okay, let's now go through a screening. So one of the screenings that we do is the Slauson screening, and with that screening, that's kind of like an initial screening where you kind of see, like, do the students have the skills that possibly show that they could be gifted? So once we go through that process, and if they screen well, then we officially submit what we call a permission to evaluate, after we call the parents, of course, to express like our interest in and see if they're interested in having their child tested, right?